The great hall reeked of wet fur and wood smoke, a combination that had become as familiar to me as my own breath. I stood near the back wall, my fingers gripping the rough stone behind me, as if it could anchor me to something solid, something real. The chandeliers above swayed gently, their candle light casting dancing shadows across the faces of the pack members who filled every corner of the room. Tonight was the lunar gathering, the monthly assembly where grievances were aired, alliances were tested, and the pecking order was reinforced with all the subtlety of a blade drawn in the dark. I didn't belong here. That truth sat heavy in my chest, a stone I'd learned to carry without complaint. My blonde hair, too pale, too soft, too human, caught the firelight in ways that made me stand out among the dark-haired, powerful Lycans surrounding me. I'd tried to braid it tightly against my scalp, to make myself smaller, less visible, but it never worked. There was always someone who noticed, always someone who sneered. "Look at her," a voice murmured from somewhere to my left. Still here, still pretending. I didn't turn. I'd learned that too. Never meet their eyes unless you want to invite their cruelty closer. The massive oak doors at the far end of the hall stood closed, but everyone could feel the weight of what lay beyond them. Who lay beyond them? King Donovan ruled the northern pack with an iron fist wrapped in silk, a leader whose reputation preceded him like the shadow of a storm cloud. They said he could smell fear from 100 yards away. They said his wolf was darker than midnight, with eyes that glowed like embers. They said he'd killed his own father to take the throne. I'd never spoken to him, never even stood in the same room as him for longer than a few moments during these gatherings. To someone like me, a human turned Lycan through a bite that barely took, weak and struggling to shift even on the fullest moon, the king existed in a realm so far above my own that we might as well have been different species entirely, which in many ways, we were. "They should have left you to die in the woods," another voice whispered, closer this time. I recognized it. Sasha, one of the females who'd made it her personal mission to remind me of my place. "You're a stain on this pack, an embarrassment." My throat tightened, but I kept my gaze fixed on the floor. The worn stone beneath my feet had seen centuries of gatherings like this, had absorbed the blood and tears of countless wolves. I wondered if the stone remembered them, if it knew their names. The doors opened. Silence crashed through the hall like a physical force, stealing the breath from every lung. I felt it in my bones, that primal shift in the atmosphere that announced predator in a room full of prey. Even though we were all wolves here, or supposed to be, there was no mistaking the hierarchy when he entered. King Donovan moved like liquid darkness, each step deliberate and unhurried. He wore black leather that seemed to drink in the candlelight, and his dark hair fell just past his shoulders, partially obscuring a face that could have been carved from granite. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch. Pale silver, almost luminous, scanning the crowd with an intensity that made my skin prickle with awareness. Behind him walked his inner circle. Garrett, his second, built like a mountain with scars that told stories of survival. Elena, the pack's seer, whose blind eyes somehow saw more than anyone else. And Rowan, the head enforcer, whose reputation for brutality made even the bravest wolves step aside. I pressed myself harder against the wall, praying the shadows would swallow me whole. "Tonight," Donovan's voice rolled through the hall, deep and commanding, "we address the attacks." A ripple of unease moved through the crowd. For the past 3 weeks, pack members had been found injured at the border territories, slashed, beaten, left for dead, but not quite killed. The attacks were calculated, designed to send a message without declaring outright war. No one knew who was responsible. No one dared to speculate too loudly. "4 of our own have been targeted," Donovan continued, moving to the center of the hall where a raised platform gave him command of the room. 4 attacks in 3 weeks. Each time the victim survives long enough to be found, but remembers nothing. No scent. No sight. No sound. His silver eyes swept across the gathered pack, and I felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. "This ends now," he said, and the promise in his voice was darker than any threat. "Whoever is responsible will be found. and they will answer to me personally. No one doubted him. No one would dare. The gathering continued with reports from various pack officials, territory disputes, resource allocations, the mundane business of keeping hundreds of Lycans organized and fed. I let the words wash over me, my mind drifting to the small cabin I called home at the edge of Packlands. It wasn't much, but it was mine. A place where I could pretend, just for a few hours, that I wasn't drowning in a world that had never wanted me. I'd been turned 2 years ago. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong victim. A rogue wolf passing through had attacked me on a hiking trail, and by some miracle or curse, the bite had taken just enough to change me, but not enough to make me strong. I was stuck between two worlds, fully accepted by neither, struggling with transformations that left me weak and vulnerable for days afterward. The pack had taken me in because Lycan law demanded it, because leaving a turned human to fend for themselves was considered dishonorable. But honor and acceptance were different things entirely. You there? The voice cut through my thoughts like a knife, and my head snapped up before I could stop myself. Donovan was looking directly at me. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack them. Those silver eyes pinned me in place, and I felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with the physical space between us. "What's your name?" he asked, and his voice was softer than before, though no less commanding. Clara, I managed, hating the way my voice shook. Clara Whitmore. Something flickered across his face, too fast to identify, gone before I could be sure it was ever there. Clara Whitmore, he repeated, as if tasting the syllables. You're housed in the Eastern Territory, the old gamekeeper's cottage. It wasn't a question. He knew. Of course he knew. He was the king. Yes, Your Majesty, I said, dropping my gaze to the floor again. Looking at him felt dangerous, like staring into the sun. Look at me when I'm speaking to you. The command was gentle, but absolute. I forced my eyes up, forced myself to meet that silver gaze even though every instinct screamed at me to run. You were attacked by a rogue 2 years ago, he said. The turn was incomplete. You struggle with the change. Heat flooded my cheeks, shame, sharp and familiar. Everyone in the hall was watching now, witnessing my humiliation laid bare. I do my best, Your Majesty, I whispered. That's not what I asked. He took a step closer, descending from the platform. The crowd parted for him like water. But it's interesting nonetheless. He was close enough now that I could smell him. Pine and smoke and something wild that made my pulse race for reasons I didn't want to examine. You live alone, he continued. You keep to yourself. You've never caused trouble, never drawn attention. His head tilted slightly, studying me with an intensity that made me feel like he could see straight through to my bones. And yet tonight, you're trembling like a rabbit in a wolf's den. My voice failed. What could I possibly say? That yes, I was terrified, that standing this close to him felt like standing at the edge of a cliff? Who hurt you, Clara? The question was so unexpected, so gentle, that for a moment I forgot how to breathe. His silver eyes had softened somehow, and there was something in his expression that looked almost like concern. I started, confused. Someone hurt you tonight, before I arrived. I can smell the fear on you and it's fresh. His jaw tightened. Who hurt you? The hall had gone so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. No one, Your Majesty, I said quickly, panic rising in my throat. I'm fine. I'm not comfortable in crowds. He stared at me for a long moment, and I had the unsettling feeling that he could hear the lie in my words, that he knew exactly what had happened, what was always happening, and was giving me the chance to confirm it, but I wouldn't, because telling him would make everything worse. The pack would turn on me completely, and I'd lose even the fragile safety I'd managed to carve out for myself. Very well, he said finally, though his tone suggested he didn't believe me for a second. He turned to address the hall, his voice returning to that commanding timbre. This gathering is concluded. Return to your territories, and remember, watch the borders. Trust no one outside this pack. The dismissal was clear. The crowd began to disperse, filing toward the exits in clusters of whispered conversations. I moved to follow, desperate to escape into the cool night air. But a hand on my arm stopped me. Elena, the seer, stood beside me. Her blind eyes were milky white, but they seemed to look right through me anyway. "He sees you," she whispered, her voice like dried leaves. "The king sees you, little wolf, and once he sees something, he doesn't look away." Before I could respond, she was gone, melting into the crowd like smoke. I stood there, frozen, her words echoing in my mind as the great hall slowly emptied around me. Outside, the moon hung heavy and full in the sky, bathing the packlands in silver light. I pulled my thin jacket tighter and started the long walk back to my cottage, my mind churning with confusion and a feeling I couldn't quite name. Behind me, I didn't see the king watching from the shadows of the doorway. Didn't see the way his hands had clenched into fists at his sides. Didn't see the gold beginning to bleed into those silver eyes, the sign of a wolf barely held in check. By morning, everything would change. By morning, the pack would learn what happened when someone hurt what the king had claimed as his own. Even if neither of us knew it yet, I woke to screaming. The sound tore through the pre-dawn darkness, high and agonized, followed by the deep, guttural snarls of wolves in combat. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. I rolled out of bed, my feet hitting the cold wooden floor as adrenaline flooded my system. Another scream. Closer this time. I stumbled to the window, my hands shaking as I pushed aside the thin curtain. The Eastern Territory stretched out before me, usually peaceful in these early hours, but now it was chaos. Wolves ran through the trees, their forms dark blurs against the lingering night, and the sounds. God, the sounds. Growls and whimpers and the terrible wet noise of flesh tearing. Something was happening. Something was very, very wrong. I threw on clothes without thinking, jeans, a sweater, boots, and grabbed the iron poker from beside my small fireplace. It was a pathetic weapon against creatures who could tear through steel, but it was all I had. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I approached my door. Should I go out there? Should I hide? The decision was made for me when someone pounded on my door hard enough to rattle the frame. "Clara!" The voice was female, breathless with panic. "Clara, open up!" I recognized the voice. Mira, one of the few pack members who'd ever shown me something resembling kindness. I fumbled with the lock and yanked the door open. Mira practically fell into my cottage, her face pale and streaked with tears. Blood splattered her shirt, though I couldn't tell if it was hers. "What's happening?" I demanded, pulling her inside and slamming the door behind her. "The king," she gasped, struggling to catch her breath. "Last night, after the gathering, something happened. He called an emergency council meeting at midnight and then," her voice broke. "Clara, he's executing people, his own pack members. He's been hunting them down since before dawn." Ice flooded my veins. "What? Why? I don't know." Mira's eyes were wild with fear. "No one knows. He won't say, won't explain. He just started with Sasha and her circle and then it spread. Garrett tried to stop him, tried to ask what was happening, and the king nearly tore his throat out. Elena's the only one who can get near him, and even she looks terrified. Sasha." The name echoed in my mind, along with the memory of her voice last night. "They should have left you to die in the woods." "How many?" I whispered. "At least 15 by now, maybe more." Mira grabbed my shoulders, her fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "Clara, you need to hide. You need to get out of Packlands entirely. Something's wrong with him. His wolf is in control and he's not stopping." Before I could respond, a howl split the air, long, haunting, and filled with such rage that it made my bones ache. It was answered by others, a chorus of submission and fear that spoke of a pack in absolute chaos. "I have to go," Mira said, releasing me and backing toward the door. "My family? I need to make sure they're safe. Please, Clara, run." She was gone before I could say another word, disappearing into the gray pre-dawn light. I stood in my cottage, the iron poker still clutched in my hand, my mind reeling. This couldn't be real. Kings didn't just slaughter their own pack members. There were laws, councils, processes. Even the most brutal leader didn't commit wholesale murder without reason. "Who hurt you, Clara?" His voice from last night whispered through my memory, soft and dangerous. "Who hurt you?" No, that couldn't be connected. It couldn't be. I was nobody. A weak, struggling Omega who barely registered on anyone's radar. The king wouldn't. He couldn't possibly. Another scream, cut short. I moved without thinking, pulled by something I couldn't name. I should have been running in the opposite direction. Should have been following Mira's advice and fleeing Packlands entirely. Instead, I found myself opening my door and stepping out into the morning that smelled of blood and terror. The Packlands had transformed into something from a nightmare. Bodies lay scattered. Not dead, I realized with relief, but unconscious or injured, being tended to by other pack members who looked shell-shocked. Wolves prowled between the trees, their eyes reflecting the growing light, all of them moving with purpose toward something. Toward the center of Packlands, toward the king's territory. I followed, keeping to the shadows, my heart hammering so hard I thought everyone must be able to hear it. The crowd grew thicker as I moved closer to the heart of Packlands. Wolves gathered in a massive circle around something I couldn't yet see. I pushed through the outer edges, ignoring the startled looks from pack members who recognized me. No one stopped me. Everyone was too focused on what was happening in the center of that circle. And then I saw him. King Donovan stood in a clearing that had been torn apart by violence. The earth was churned up, trees bore claw marks, and the metallic scent of blood hung thick in the air, but it was the king himself who stole my breath. He'd partially shifted, that dangerous middle ground where human and wolf merged into something more terrifying than either form alone. His hands had become claws, his face was elongated with fangs visible even from where I stood, and his eyes were pure molten gold, no trace of silver remaining. At his feet lay Trevor, one of the pack's strongest warriors, whimpering and bleeding from dozens of wounds. "Please," Trevor gasped. "Please, Your Majesty, I don't know what I did." "You laughed." Donovan's voice was barely human, a growl that scraped against my ears. "Last month, at the previous gathering, you laughed when she dropped her cup. My cup." He was talking about me. I remembered that night. I'd been so nervous that my hands had been shaking, and I'd dropped the ceremonial cup during the opening ritual. The sound of it hitting the stone floor had echoed through the hall, and yes, people had laughed. Trevor had been one of them. "That was nothing," Trevor pleaded. "Just a laugh, just—" "You made her feel small," Donovan snarled. "You made her feel ashamed. You added to her fear." "No, I'm sorry. I'll apologize, Too late." The king's clawed hand wrapped around Trevor's throat. "I asked her who hurt her. She wouldn't tell me. So I found out myself." Garrett stepped forward from where he'd been standing at the edge of the circle, his face grim. "Donovan, enough. You've made your point. The pack understands. They won't—" "Do they?" Donovan's head snapped toward his second, and even Garrett flinched. "Do they understand that she is mine? That every insult, every slight, every moment of cruelty toward her is an insult to me?" The crowd erupted in whispers, shock rippling through the assembled wolves. I felt my knees go weak. Elena moved forward, her blind eyes somehow finding the king's face. "You're scaring her," she said quietly. "The very one you're trying to protect. She's here, watching this, and you're scaring her." Donovan went absolutely still. "Where?" "Behind you. 20 paces. She's been here for 5 minutes." Slowly, so slowly, the king turned. His golden eyes scanned the crowd, and I knew the moment he found me. The world seemed to narrow down to just the two of us, everything else fading into meaningless background noise. He released Trevor, who collapsed to the ground, gasping. In 3 strides, Donovan crossed the space between us, and the crowd melted away like mist. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything but stare up at him as he towered over me. Up close, I could see the struggle in his eyes, the man fighting with the wolf, both of them focused entirely on me. "You shouldn't be here," he said, and his voice was rough, scraping over the words like broken glass. "You're killing people," I whispered. Because of me. No. He shook his head slowly, and I watched some of the gold fade from his eyes. Silver bleeding back in. I'm delivering justice. There's a difference. I couldn't find the words. How could I explain that their cruelty was normal? That I'd learned to accept it as the price of existing in a world that didn't want me? They hurt you. His hand lifted, and I flinched before I could stop myself. He froze, his expression shifting into something that looked like pain. They hurt you, and they enjoyed it. That ends now. I don't understand, I breathed. Why do you care? I'm nothing. I'm nobody. Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or disbelief. Is that what you think? Before I could answer, a commotion at the edge of the clearing drew everyone's attention. Rowan emerged from the tree line, dragging 2 wolves behind him, both in human form, both bloodied and terrified. Found them trying to flee through the northern border, Rowan announced. Vincent and Carrie, both admitted to the accidents that kept happening near the Omega's cottage. My cottage. Accidents. I remembered them now. The branch that had nearly hit me during a storm, the spoiled meat left on my doorstep, the slashed tires on the bicycle I'd used for transportation. I'd thought they were just bad luck. Just another sign that the universe didn't want me here. Donovan's eyes flashed gold again. Bring them here. No, I said, surprising myself. Please, no more. He looked down at me, and for a moment, I saw confusion in his expression. They tried to hurt you, repeatedly. And you've scared them enough. I forced myself to meet his eyes, even though it felt like touching fire. They'll never come near me again, neither will anyone else. You've made your point. Please, just stop. The clearing was silent. Every wolf in the pack was watching this exchange, witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. Donovan stared at me for what felt like an eternity. Then slowly, he turned to Rowan. Exile. Both of them. They have until sunset to be beyond pack borders. Relief flooded through me so powerfully I almost collapsed. Exile was harsh, but it wasn't death. The rest of you, Donovan's voice rang out across the clearing, addressing the entire pack. Remember this day. Remember that she is under my protection. Any harm that comes to her, any insult, any slight, any moment of deliberate cruelty will be answered by me personally. And I will not be merciful a second time. He looked back at me, and the gold was fading further now, silver returning to dominance. Come with me. It wasn't a request. He walked away, clearly expecting me to follow, and after a moment's hesitation, I did. What choice did I have? The crowd parted for us, every wolf we passed lowering their eyes in submission, not to me, but to him. To the king who had just declared me untouchable. We walked in silence through packlands, past the Great Hall, past the council buildings, deeper into territory I'd never been allowed to enter, the king's personal lands. Finally, we reached a house. No, a mansion, built of dark stone and heavy timber, surrounded by ancient trees that seemed to stand guard. He led me inside without a word, through corridors lined with weapons and tapestries depicting pack history, until we reached a room that looked like a study. Only then did he close the door and turn to face me. The partial shift had receded completely. He was fully human again, though his eyes still held that predatory gleam. "I've frightened you," he said quietly. "Yes." There was no point in lying. "I'm not sorry for what I did. I'm only sorry that you had to see it." He moved to a desk by the window, putting distance between us. "They hurt you, Clara. For 2 years they've hurt you, and you just accepted it." What else was I supposed to do? The words burst out of me, carried on a wave of emotion I hadn't known I was holding back. Fight back? I'm weak. I'm broken. They were right about everything they said. I am an embarrassment to the pack. I don't belong here. Stop. The word cracked like a whip. Don't you dare repeat their poison like it's truth. Isn't it? I demanded, anger rising now to join the fear and confusion. Look at me. I can barely shift. I can't hunt. I can't fight. What good am I to a Lycan pack? He crossed the distance between us in 2 strides, and suddenly his hands were on my shoulders, his silver eyes boring into mine. You showed me mercy today. When I would have torn them apart, you asked me to stop. Not because you're weak, but because you're stronger than any of them could ever hope to be. I tried to pull away, but his grip was firm. That's not strength. That's just compassion, he finished. Humanity. The very things that make you different are the things that make you valuable, Clara. You just can't see it yet. Tears burned at the back of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Why? I whispered. Why do you care? His expression shifted, becoming something almost vulnerable. I don't know yet, he admitted, but I intend to find out. He kept me in the mansion for 3 days. Not as a prisoner. He made that clear from the start. I was free to leave whenever I wanted, free to return to my cottage and my solitary life, but he asked me to stay, and something in the way he asked made it impossible to refuse. The first day, I barely saw him. Garrett came instead, bringing food and explaining in his gruff way that the pack was adjusting to the new order. 15 wolves had been exiled in total. Another dozen injured but allowed to remain. The message had been received. I was no longer fair game. He's not usually like this, Garrett told me as I picked at a plate of food I couldn't taste. Volatile, I mean. Donovan's always been calculated, controlled. Even when he killed his father, it was strategic. He paused, studying me with those sharp hazel eyes. You've done something to him. Changed something. I didn't do anything, I protested weakly. Exactly. Garrett's smile was grim. You didn't have to. The second day, Elena visited. She moved through the mansion like she'd lived there her whole life, her blind eyes somehow navigating every obstacle. She found me in the library, a room filled with more books than I'd ever seen in one place. The king won't tell you this himself, she said without preamble, settling into a chair across from me. But he dreamed of you. 3 months before you even arrived at that first gathering, he dreamed of golden hair and gray eyes, and a pain so deep it called to his own. My hand stilled on the book I'd been pretending to read. That's not possible. I don't deal in possible, child. I deal in what is. Her milky eyes seemed to focus on something beyond me, beyond the room itself. He's been alone his entire life. Raised by a father who saw him as a weapon, trained to rule but never taught how to feel. And then you appeared, small and scared and trying so hard to be invisible, and something in him recognized something in you. What? I whispered, afraid of the answer. Loneliness, Elena said simply. The kind that eats you from the inside out. The kind that makes you forget what warmth feels like. She stood, preparing to leave. He sees you, Clara. Not what you can't do, but what you are. The question is, can you see him? She left me alone with those words, and I spent the rest of the day unable to focus on anything else. The third day, Donovan finally came. I was in the garden behind the mansion when I felt his presence, that primal awareness that had nothing to do with sound or sight, and everything to do with the way the air itself seemed to shift around him. I'd been examining a patch of nightshade, recognizing it from books I'd read about poisonous plants. Careful, his voice came from behind me. Touch that with bare skin and you'll be sick for a week. I turned to find him watching me from the stone archway that led into the garden. He wore simple clothes, dark jeans and a gray sweater, but somehow still managed to look every inch the king he was. His dark hair was tied back, revealing the sharp angles of his face. I know, I said, gesturing to the gloves I wore. I'm not completely helpless. Something that might have been amusement flickered in his silver eyes. I never thought you were. He moved closer, and I noticed he looked tired. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and there was a tension in his shoulders that spoke of sleepless nights. Are you all right? The question escaped before I could stop it. He seemed surprised by it. You're asking if I'm all right, after what I did? You haven't slept, I observed. And Garrett says you've been patrolling the borders yourself instead of sending scouts. You're wearing yourself down. The pack needs to know I'm in control. He stopped a few feet away, maintaining distance. After what happened, they need to see strength. They saw strength, I countered. Maybe what they need now is to see mercy. He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. You're not afraid of me anymore. It was true, I realized. The terror that had gripped me 3 days ago had faded into something more complex. wariness mixed with curiosity, confusion tangled with an emotion I didn't want to name. Should I be? I asked. Most people are. He moved to a stone bench nearby, sitting with a grace that reminded me he was still a predator, still dangerous. Even my inner circle walks carefully around me, but you asked me to show mercy when I was drowning in rage. You stood between me and my wolf like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't want more people to die because of me. I pulled off the gloves, setting them aside. It wasn't courage. It was guilt. It was both. He patted the bench beside him. Sit, please. I hesitated, then crossed the space between us and sat, leaving several inches of distance. The garden around us was peaceful, filled with the soft sounds of wind through leaves and distant birdsong. It felt surreal to be sitting here with the king of the northern pack, discussing philosophy like we were old friends. Tell me about the bite, he said quietly. About what happened to you. So I did. I told him about the hiking trail, about the rogue wolf that had appeared from nowhere, about the pain and the terror and waking up in a hospital 3 days later with knowledge I shouldn't have had. I told him about being tracked down by pack representatives, about being told I had no choice but to join them or die, about the years of struggling to shift, of feeling my bones try to break and reform but never quite completing the process, of being trapped between two worlds with no map to guide me. He listened without interrupting, his silver eyes never leaving my face. I tried. I finished. My voice small. I tried so hard to be what they wanted. To be strong, to fit in, to prove I deserved to be here. But nothing I did was ever enough. That's because you were trying to be someone else, Donovan said. They wanted you to fit a mold you were never meant to fill. Then what am I meant to be? The question came out more desperately than I'd intended. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away, and tucked a strand of my pale blonde hair behind my ear. The touch was gentle, almost reverent. I don't know yet, but I think we're going to find out together. My breath caught at the intimacy of the gesture, at the promise in his words. Why are you doing this? Really? Because when I asked who hurt you, and you wouldn't tell me, his hand dropped away, but his eyes held mine captive. I realized that you'd been hurt so many times, by so many people, that you couldn't even separate one incident from another. It was just constant. A steady stream of cruelty that you'd learned to weather like someone learns to breathe polluted air. That's just how it was. It shouldn't have been. His voice hardened. You were turned against your will, brought into a pack that should have protected you, and instead they made you a target. That's not pack law. That's not how we're supposed to treat our own. I'm not really one of you, though, I said quietly. We both know that. You're more pack than half the wolves I exiled. He stood, pacing to the edge of the garden where roses climbed a trellis. Strength isn't just about how hard you can hit, or how fast you can run. It's about endurance, resilience, the ability to face cruelty and not become cruel yourself. He looked back at me. By that measure, Clara Whitmore, you're one of the strongest wolves I've ever met. Tears burned at my eyes, and this time I couldn't stop them from falling. No one had ever spoken to me like this. No one had ever looked at me and seen anything worth valuing. He was back at my side in an instant, and before I could protest, he pulled me into his arms. The embrace was firm, but careful, like he was afraid I might break. I'm sorry, he murmured against my hair. I'm sorry for what they did to you. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry for all of it. I let myself lean into him, let myself accept the comfort he was offering. He smelled like pine and smoke, and something uniquely him, and beneath my ear I could hear the steady thump of his heartbeat. It was faster than it should have been, racing like he'd been running. We stayed like that for a long time, the king and the outcast, finding solace in each other's broken places. When we finally pulled apart, the sun was setting, painting the garden in shades of gold and crimson. Come to dinner, he said. Not here, the great hall. I want the pack to see us together. I want them to understand that this isn't just protection I'm offering you. What is it then? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. A choice, he said, a chance for both of us to stop being alone. That night, I walked into the great hall beside the king. The entire pack was assembled, and the silence that fell when we entered was absolute. I could feel their eyes on us, could sense their shock and confusion, and in some cases, their fear. Donovan led me to the head table where his inner circle sat. Garrett nodded to me, respect clear in his eyes. Elena smiled her knowing smile. Rowan remained impassive, but he inclined his head slightly, an acknowledgement. "From this day forward," Donovan announced, his voice carrying through the hall, "Clara Whitmore is part of my household. She is under my direct protection, and any who wish to address her must first address me." The declaration sent ripples through the crowd. I saw shock on some faces, calculation on others, but no one objected. No one dared. The dinner that followed was surreal. Pack members who had ignored me for 2 years now nodded politely when I passed. Wolves who had sneered at my weakness now averted their eyes out of respect or fear. The entire dynamic had shifted, and I found myself at the center of it all, still trying to understand how this had happened. Mira appeared halfway through the meal, her face breaking into a genuine smile when she saw me. "I heard you were here," she said, sliding into the seat beside me. "I'm glad you're safe. After everything that happened, I was worried." "I'm okay," I assured her. More than okay, actually. She glanced at Donovan, who was deep in conversation with Garrett, then leaned closer to me. "He's different around you," she whispered. "Softer. I've never seen him like this. I don't know what I'm doing," I admitted. "This all feels like a dream." "Then don't wake up," Mira said simply. "You deserve something good, Clara. You've earned it 10 times over." Later, after the meal had ended and the pack had dispersed, Donovan walked me back to the mansion through torchlit paths. The night was cool, and stars scattered across the sky like diamonds. "You handled that well," he said. "The dinner. I know it wasn't easy." "It was strange," I admitted. "Being seen as something other than a burden." "You were never a burden." He stopped walking, turning to face me. "Clara, I need you to understand something. What I feel, what I'm beginning to feel, it's not pity. It's not some misplaced need to rescue someone weaker than me. Then what is it?" My heart was thundering again, that nervous anticipation building in my chest. "Recognition," he said simply, "like calling to like. Loneliness recognizing itself in another person and thinking, maybe we don't have to carry this alone anymore." He reached out, his hand cupping my cheek with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone so powerful. "I don't know where this goes," he continued. "I don't know what we become to each other. But I want to find out, if you'll let me." I leaned into his touch, letting myself have this moment of connection, of possibility. "I'm scared," I whispered. "So am I." His thumb traced my cheekbone, "But maybe we can be scared together." I rose on my toes and pressed my lips to his, a brief, tentative kiss that held more hope than passion, more promise than certainty. When I pulled back, his eyes had darkened to silver storm clouds. "Stay here," he said, his voice rough. "Not as a guest. Stay with me. Let me show you what it means to be valued. Let me prove that you belong somewhere." "Okay," I breathed. "Yes." The smile that crossed his face was like sunrise breaking through darkness. Rare, beautiful, and impossibly bright. That night, I slept in a room adjoining his, separated by a door that remained closed, but unlocked. It was the first night in 2 years that I didn't dream of running, of being chased, of never being fast enough. Instead, I dreamed of silver eyes and steady heartbeats, and the possibility of home. The weeks that followed felt like living in a different world. Donovan was patient, almost maddeningly so. He never pushed, never demanded more than I was willing to give. We fell into a rhythm that felt natural despite its strangeness. Mornings spent walking the packlands together. Afternoons where I explored the massive library while he handled pack business. Evenings where we'd sit by the fireplace and talk until the logs burned down to embers. He told me about his childhood, about a father who'd valued power above all else, and had beaten that lesson into his son with methodical brutality. About the day he'd finally fought back, finally ended the cycle of violence by becoming the very thing his father had tried to create, a king without mercy. Except you do have mercy, I'd said that night, watching the firelight play across his features. You showed it when I asked you to. Only for you, he'd replied, and there was something almost vulnerable in his admission. Only ever for you. I told him about my life before the bite. A quiet existence working in a bookstore, living alone, content with my solitude. About how the attack had ripped me from everything familiar and thrust me into a world where I understood nothing. You understand more than you think, he'd said. You understand survival. You understand endurance. Those aren't small things, Clara. But it wasn't just conversations by firelight. He was teaching me, I realized. Showing me pack dynamics I'd never understood. Explaining hierarchies and traditions that had always confused me. Garrett joined us sometimes, gruff but patient, as he demonstrated defensive techniques that didn't require a full shift. Elena taught me about pack history, about the old ways that had been lost over generations. And slowly, impossibly, I began to feel like I belonged. The pack's attitude toward me had shifted dramatically. Where once they'd ignored me, now they acknowledged me with careful respect. Where once they'd sneered, now they kept their distance, not from fear exactly, but from a kind of wary recognition that I was no longer invisible. Mira became a regular presence, visiting the mansion often enough that Donovan started referring to her as your shadow, with amused tolerance. She'd been given a position in the household staff, a promotion that everyone knew was because of her friendship with me, but one she'd earned through her loyalty. You're different, she said one afternoon as we sat in the garden, where I'd first really talked to Donovan. Stronger. More confident. I don't feel stronger, I admitted, pruning the roses that had become my responsibility. Donovan had given me free rein over the garden, and I'd discovered a talent for coaxing life from the earth. But you are. Mira leaned back against the bench, tilting her face toward the sun. You held your ground with Marcus yesterday. The old Clara would have apologized and backed down. Marcus, one of the senior warriors who'd made a dismissive comment about my garden work being women's work, and therefore beneath notice. I'd surprised both of us by pointing out that he'd benefit from learning patience and precision, instead of just relying on brute strength. Donovan had overheard and spent the rest of the day trying not to smile. I'm learning, I said quietly. He's teaching me that my voice matters, that I don't have to make myself smaller to deserve space. He's learning too, Mira observed. How to be gentle, how to trust. Elena says she's never seen him this settled. I glanced toward the mansion, where I knew Donovan was in a council meeting. Do you think it's real? All of this? You mean, do I think the king is actually falling in love with you? Mira's grin was wicked. Clara, everyone can see it except maybe you two. Heat flooded my cheeks. That's not... We haven't... You don't have to sleep together for it to be love, she said gently. The way he looks at you when you're not watching. The way you soften when he's near. That's not protection, Clara. That's not obligation. That's real. Before I could respond, a commotion near the mansion's entrance caught our attention. Raised voices, the sound of scuffling, and then Garrett's commanding bark. Stand down! Mira and I exchanged glances before running toward the sound. We found chaos in the main courtyard. A group of wolves, strangers from their scent, were surrounded by pack guards, weapons drawn on both sides. At the center stood a woman with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that burned with fury. I demand to see Donovan, she snarled. I demand to see the king who murdered my daughter. My blood ran cold. Murdered? Donovan emerged from the mansion, Rowan at his side, his expression carved from ice. Celeste, you're not welcome here. Not welcome? The woman, Celeste, laughed, but there was no humor in it. My daughter is dead because of you, and I'm not welcome. Sasha was exiled for nothing, and she was killed by rogues before she even crossed the border. Her blood is on your hands, Sasha. The name hit me like a physical blow. The woman who'd whispered cruelties at the gathering, who'd been part of the first group Donovan had exiled. Dead. She was exiled for cruelty, Donovan said, his voice dangerously soft, for systematic abuse of a pack member, for making someone's life a living nightmare for 2 years. Those were her choices, Celeste. The consequences were earned. For what? For some weak human who can't even shift properly? Celeste's eyes found me in the crowd, and the hatred in them was a living thing. For her? You destroyed lives, tore apart families, killed my daughter, all for that pathetic creature? The guards tensed, hands tightening on weapons. Garrett moved to intercept, but Donovan held up a hand, stopping him. "Choose your next words very carefully," the king said, and gold was beginning to bleed into his silver eyes. "You stand in my territory, insult someone under my protection, and accuse me of murder. Give me one reason why I shouldn't exile you too." "Because I'm not alone." Celeste gestured to the wolves behind her, 8 of them, all battle-scarred and dangerous-looking. "Because there are others who think you've lost your mind over some human. Because challenging a king isn't forbidden when that king has abandoned his duty to the pack." The courtyard went deadly silent. A challenge. She was issuing a formal challenge to Donovan's rule. "No," I heard myself say, stepping forward before I could think better of it. "No, this isn't— Clara, don't." Donovan's voice was sharp, commanding. But I kept walking until I stood between him and Celeste, my heart hammering so hard I could barely hear over it. "Your daughter hurt me," I said, facing Celeste directly. For 2 years, she and others like her made every day a struggle. They didn't want me dead. That would have been merciful. They wanted me to suffer, to feel small, to know I didn't belong, and I accepted it because I thought that was just how things were. "You should have left," Celeste spat. "You should have run back to your human life." Maybe. I forced myself to stand straighter, to meet her hateful gaze. But I didn't, and Donovan didn't kill your daughter. He gave her a chance. Exile instead of execution. What happened to her after that wasn't his fault. "She wouldn't have been out there if not for him." Celeste's voice broke. "If not for you. If not for her own actions," I corrected. "I'm sorry she's dead, truly. But her cruelty had consequences, and those consequences were just." Celeste moved so fast I barely saw her coming. One moment she was 10 feet away, the next her claws were extending toward my throat, and then she was flying backward, Donovan's hand wrapped around her neck, his entire body vibrating with barely contained violence. "Touch her," he growled, fully shifted now into that terrifying half-form, "and exile will be the least of your worries." "Stop!" I shouted, grabbing his arm. It was like trying to move a mountain, but I held on anyway. "Donovan, stop. Please. Don't become what she thinks you are." His golden eyes met mine, wild and feral. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't hear me. Then, slowly, the gold faded back to silver and his grip on Celeste loosened. "Get out," he said, his voice still rough but more controlled. "Take your wolves and go. If I see you on Packlands again, challenge or no challenge, I will end you." Celeste scrambled backward, fear finally breaking through her rage. She and her wolves retreated, but the look she shot me promised this wasn't over. When they were gone, the courtyard remained tense. Donovan turned to me, and I saw something in his expression I'd never seen before— doubt. "Did you mean it?" he asked quietly. "What you said about the consequences being just." I hesitated, thinking about Sasha, about her death, about whether my pain had been worth someone else's life. I meant that she made her choices. And yes, they had consequences. But I also don't want more people dying because of me, Donovan. I don't want to be the reason for more grief. He pulled me close, and I felt him trembling, the after effects of the shift, or emotion, or both. "You're not the reason. Their cruelty is the reason. Their refusal to show basic decency is the reason. Don't take their sins onto yourself." But as he held me, as the pack dispersed with worried whispers, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, that Celeste's words had planted seeds of doubt that would grow in dark soil. That night, for the first time in weeks, Donovan didn't come to sit by the fire with me. He locked himself in his study, and when I pressed my ear to the door, I could hear him pacing, muttering, arguing with himself, or his wolf, or both. I retreated to my room and lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if loving someone, if being loved by someone, was supposed to feel this complicated. The next morning, I woke to find a note slipped under my door. "Meet me at the Border Grove at sunset. There's something I need to show you." The Border Grove was neutral territory. a place where packlands met the wilderness beyond. I'd never been there, but Mira gave me directions after I showed her the note. "Be careful," she said, worry creasing her forehead. "After yesterday, tensions are high. Some of the pack are saying Celeste had a point." "About what?" "About whether one person is worth all this upheaval." She grabbed my hands. "I don't agree with them, Clara, but you should know what people are saying." I arrived at the grove as the sun was painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Donovan was already there, standing at the edge of the clearing, his back to me. "You came," he said without turning around. "You asked me to." He finally faced me, and I was struck by how tired he looked. How conflicted. "I've been thinking about what Celeste said, about what I've done to this pack because of you." My heart sank. "Donovan, let me finish." He crossed to me, taking my hands in his. "I've been asking myself if it was worth it. If protecting you, if caring about you, if falling in." He stopped, jaw tightening. "If all of this was worth the chaos it's caused." And the word was barely a whisper, and I realized something. His silver eyes held mine, intense and unwavering. "I don't care. I don't care if the whole pack questions me. I don't care if half of them think I've lost my mind, because for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm more than just a king. More than just a weapon my father forged. With you, I'm just me." Tears blurred my vision. "You're not just anything. You're everything." He pulled me close, and this time when he kissed me, it wasn't tentative or questioning. It was claiming and promising and saying everything words couldn't express. I kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring 2 years of loneliness and fear and desperate hope into the contact. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. "I brought you here because this is where pack territory ends," he said. "If you want to leave, if this is too much, too complicated, too dangerous, I'll help you. I'll make sure you're safe, give you resources to start somewhere new. But you have to choose, Clara, because if you stay, we're in this together, all the way." I thought about my cottage, about 2 years of existing in the shadows. I thought about the library, the garden, the firelight conversations. I thought about belonging, about being seen, about no longer being alone. "I choose you," I said firmly. "I choose us. Whatever comes next, we face it together." The smile that broke across his face was worth every moment of fear, every second of doubt. "Then let's go home," he said, taking my hand. "And tomorrow we start building something new, something better." We walked back through the darkening forest, hand in hand, neither of us knowing that Celeste was watching from the shadows, her eyes burning with plans for revenge. The attack came 2 weeks later, in the deep hours before dawn when even wolves slept soundly. I woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of shattering glass. For a confused moment, I thought I was dreaming. But then Donovan burst through the connecting door, already half-shifted, his eyes blazing gold. "Get up," he commanded. "We're under attack." I scrambled out of bed, my heart racing. Through the window, I could see flames licking at one of the outer buildings, and shadows moving with deadly purpose through the grounds. "How many?" I asked, pulling on clothes with shaking hands. "At least 20. Maybe more." He grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. Garrett is waiting at the back entrance. He'll take you to the safe house in the eastern woods. You go with him. You stay hidden, and you don't come out until I come for you personally. Do you understand? What about you? I'm the king. My place is here, defending my pack." He pressed a quick, fierce kiss to my forehead. "Go, now." But as I moved toward the door, an explosion rocked the mansion, throwing us both to the floor. The wall beside us crumbled, and through the gap I saw them, wolves pouring into the compound, led by Celeste in her full wolf form, silver and black and radiating fury. Donovan was on his feet instantly, positioning himself between me and the breach. "Run, Clara!" I ran, but not toward the back entrance. Some instinct I didn't understand pulled me in a different direction, toward the Great Hall, toward the heart of Packlands where I could hear fighting, screaming, the sounds of wolves tearing into each other, The scene in the courtyard was carnage. Pack members fought desperately against the invaders, but Celeste had brought rogues, desperate, vicious wolves with nothing to lose. Blood stained the ground, and the air reeked of violence and fear. I saw Mira backed against a wall, 3 rogues closing in on her. Without thinking, I grabbed a fallen branch, thick and heavy, and ran forward, bringing it down on the nearest rogue's head with all my strength. The wood cracked, the wolf yelped and turned on me, and suddenly I was staring into yellow eyes that promised death. Then Rowan was there, his massive form slamming into the rogue and sending it flying. "What are you doing here?" he snarled at me. "You're supposed to be— Help them!" I shouted, pointing to where a group of younger pack members were being overwhelmed. "I'll get Mira out." I grabbed Mira's hand and pulled her toward the great hall. We stumbled inside, and I barred the heavy doors behind us, buying us precious moments. "You shouldn't be here," Mira gasped, blood streaming from a cut on her temple. The king is busy keeping everyone alive." I tore strips from my shirt, pressing them to her wound. "We need to get the elderly and the young ones to safety. Where's the basement entrance?" She pointed with a shaking hand, and together we moved through the hall, gathering the vulnerable, children too young to fight, elders too frail, anyone who couldn't defend themselves. We herded them into the basement, a reinforced space that had been built generations ago for exactly this purpose. Elena was already there, organizing people with calm efficiency despite her blindness. When she heard my voice, she turned toward me with that knowing expression. "You didn't run," she said. It wasn't a question. I couldn't. I helped lower a crying child into her mother's arms, not when people needed help. "He's going to be furious with you." "I know." I moved back toward the stairs. "Keep them safe, Elena. Don't open this door for anyone but Donovan, Garrett, or Rowan. Where are you going?" "To do something stupid," I admitted. "Something that might actually help." I left before she could argue, emerging back into the chaos of the courtyard. The fighting had intensified. I could see Donovan in the distance, fully shifted into his massive black wolf form, tearing through rogues with brutal efficiency. Garrett fought at his side, and Rowan was coordinating the pack's defense with savage precision. But Celeste was cunning. While everyone was focused on the frontal assault, she'd sent a smaller group around the back, and they were heading toward the mansion, toward the study where I knew Donovan kept sensitive documents, alliance treaties, information that could destroy the pack if it fell into the wrong hands. I ran, my lungs burning, my legs screaming in protest. I wasn't fast like a true wolf, wasn't strong like them, but I knew the mansion's layout better than any invader could. I took shortcuts through the garden, vaulted over the stone wall, and burst through a side entrance just as the rogues were breaking into the study. There were 4 of them, all in human form, ransacking the room with methodical efficiency. They froze when they saw me, surprise flickering across their faces. "Wrong room," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "What you're looking for isn't here." The largest one, a scarred man with cold eyes, smiled. "The king's little pet. Celeste said you might be trouble." "Celeste talks too much." I edged toward the fireplace, where I knew Donovan kept a ceremonial blade mounted above the mantel. "You should leave while you still can." "Or what? You'll stop us?" He laughed, moving closer. "You can barely shift. You're nothing." "Maybe." I grabbed the blade, the weight unfamiliar in my hands but solid, real. "But I'm nothing with a weapon and everything to lose. That makes me dangerous." He lunged. I swung. The blade caught him across the arm. Not deep, but enough to draw blood, enough to make him howl in pain. His companions moved in, but I was already backing toward the door, leading them away from the study, away from the information they'd come to steal. We spilled back into the corridor, and I ran, the rogues at my heels. I could hear them gaining, could feel their breath hot on my neck, and knew I wouldn't make it much farther. Then a roar shook the very foundations of the mansion, primal, possessive, and absolutely furious. Donovan crashed through the corridor wall in his full wolf form, and the rogues scattered like leaves before a storm, but he wasn't interested in them. His glowing eyes locked on me, taking in the blade in my hands. The blood splattered on my clothes, the way I was trembling with adrenaline and fear. He shifted back to human form, a transformation that should have taken minutes but happened in seconds, and grabbed my shoulders. "I told you to run," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "I told you to get to safety." "They were going for the study," I explained breathlessly. "For the alliance documents. I couldn't let them." He kissed me, hard and desperate, cutting off my words. When he pulled back, there were tears in his silver eyes. "You magnificent, terrifying, impossible woman. Do you have any idea what it did to me when I realized you weren't with Garrett? When I thought you might be hurt or captured or—" Another explosion cut him off. We both turned toward the sound, coming from the direction of the courtyard. "Celeste," he growled. "She's making her final play." We ran together through the smoke-filled corridors, emerging into a courtyard that had fallen eerily silent. The fighting had stopped, both sides drawing back to watch what was happening at the center. Celeste stood there in human form, holding something in her hands, a small vial that glowed with sickly green light. Even from a distance, I could feel the wrongness of it, the way it made my skin crawl. "Nightshade poison," Elena's voice came from behind us. She'd emerged from the basement, guided by one of the young wolves, mixed with silver and moonflower, lethal to Lycans even in small doses. "Clever king," Celeste called out, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "You've built quite the defense, but you have a weakness now, something you care about more than your own life." Her eyes found me. "All I have to do is break this vial, and the poison will spread through the air. Your pack will die. Unless what?" Donovan demanded, moving in front of me protectively. "Unless you give her to me." Celeste's smile was vicious. "The human who cost me my daughter. Give her to me, let me have my justice, and I'll leave your pack intact." The courtyard erupted in whispers. I felt the pack's eyes on me, felt them weighing the option, one life against many, felt them calculating whether I was truly worth the cost. "No," Donovan said simply. "No?" Celeste laughed. "You'd sacrifice your entire pack for one weak human? This is exactly what I've been saying. You're not fit to rule. You've put personal desire above pack welfare." "I've put compassion above cruelty," Donovan corrected. "And I'm not trading anyone's life for false promises from someone who's already proven she can't be trusted." "Then you've killed them all," Celeste said, raising the vial. "Wait," I stepped out from behind Donovan, ignoring his growl of protest. "If this is about justice for your daughter, then take me. But let the poison go. Let the pack live." "Clara? No." Donovan tried to pull me back, but I shook him off. "She's right about one thing," I said, looking at him with all the love I felt pouring through my gaze. "You're the king. Your duty is to the pack, not to me. And I choose to save them. I choose to be worth something. You've always been worth something," he said desperately. "Clara, please." "I know," I whispered. "You taught me that. Thank you." I walked toward Celeste, each step feeling like moving through water. The pack watched in stunned silence. Behind me I heard Donovan's anguished roar, heard him shift. But Garrett and Rowan held him back, understanding what I was doing even if they hated it. I stopped a few feet from Celeste, meeting her hateful gaze. "Let them live," I said. "That's all I ask." She studied me for a long moment, and I saw confusion flicker across her face. "You really mean it. You're really willing to die for them, for a pack that never wanted you." "I'm willing to die for him," I corrected. "For the one who showed me I mattered. And yes, for the pack, because they're his, and he loves them, and that's enough." Celeste's hand trembled, the vial swayed. "My daughter made her choices," I said gently. "As I'm making mine. The difference is, I'm choosing love. She chose hate. And in the end, that's what killed her. Not exile, not rogues. Her own hatred consumed her." Something broke in Celeste's expression. The vial slipped from her fingers, and I caught it, my hands closing around the glass with desperate speed. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then Celeste collapsed to her knees, sobbing, great, wrenching sounds of grief that had been held back too long. "I just wanted her back," she whispered. "I just wanted my daughter back." "I know," I said, carefully setting the vial on the ground and kicking it away. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for your loss. Donovan was at my side instantly, pulling me into his arms while Rowan secured Celeste and the other rogues. The pack erupted into cheers. We'd won, we'd survived, and somehow I'd managed to defuse the situation without more bloodshed. But all I could focus on was the way Donovan was holding me, like he'd never let go again. Don't ever do that again, he said against my hair. Don't ever offer yourself up like that. Promise me. I can't promise that, I admitted. Because I'd do it again in a heartbeat if it meant keeping you safe. He pulled back to look at me, and there were tears streaming down his face. You're supposed to let me protect you. That's my job. And you're supposed to let me love you. I countered. Which means protecting you too. That's how this works, Donovan. We protect each other. He kissed me then, in front of the entire pack, a kiss that tasted of smoke and blood and desperate relief. When we finally broke apart, the pack was chanting. Not his name, I realized with shock, but mine. Clara, Clara, Clara. Elena appeared at my elbow, her blind eyes somehow finding mine. They see you now, she said simply. Finally, they all see what he's seen from the beginning. The days that followed were a blur of healing and rebuilding. Celeste and her rogues were sent away with supplies and a warning. They could start over elsewhere, but if they ever returned, there would be no mercy. Some of the pack argued against this leniency, but Donovan stood firm. Revenge breeds revenge, he told the council. It ends here. Mira recovered from her injuries and was given an official position as my personal guard, a role she accepted with tearful gratitude. Garrett began training me in combat, grudgingly admitting that I had decent instincts for someone who can't shift properly. Rowan even cracked a smile once, when I successfully disarmed him during practice. A month after the attack, Donovan called another gathering in the Great Hall. The entire pack assembled, curious and speculating about what announcement he would make. He stood at the center of the hall, and I stood beside him. No longer hiding in shadows, but visible, present, accepted. 2 months ago, he began. I nearly tore this pack apart. I let rage control me, let my wolf dictate actions that should have been tempered with wisdom. He paused, his silver eyes scanning the crowd, but I don't regret it, because in doing so, I exposed a rot that had been growing in our midst, the casual cruelty we'd all learned to accept as normal. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Clara Whitmore showed us a different way, he continued. She could have let me kill every wolf who'd ever hurt her. Instead, she asked for mercy. She could have run when we were attacked. Instead, she stayed and fought. She could have let us all die to save herself. Instead, she offered her life for ours. He turned to me, taking my hands in his. She's shown more courage, more strength, more leadership than most wolves twice her size. And so I'm asking the pack, will you accept her as my mate, as your queen? The silence that followed felt eternal. I held my breath, waiting for the rejection I was certain would come. Then Garrett stepped forward. I accept her. His voice was gruff but sincere. She's earned her place 10 times over. Elena moved next. I accept her. The spirits have shown me her path, and it leads to greatness. Rowan nodded. She's fierce when it matters. I accept her. And then, one by one, wolves throughout the hall stepped forward. Warriors and mothers, elders and youth, even some who'd once sneered at me. Not all of them, not everyone, but enough. More than enough. We accept her, they said in chorus. We accept our queen. Tears streamed down my face as Donovan pulled me close, and the hall erupted in howls. The traditional acceptance of a new leader. I was home, truly home, in a way I'd never imagined possible. That night, alone in our chambers, fully ours now, the connecting door permanently opened. Donovan held me close as moonlight streamed through the windows. I never thought I'd find this, he admitted quietly. Someone who sees past the king to the man underneath. Someone who makes me want to be better. I never thought I'd find anywhere I belonged, I replied. But you showed me that belonging isn't about being perfect. It's about being accepted for who you are. He kissed my temple, my cheek, my lips. I love you, Clara Whitmore. My queen, my mate, my home. I love you too, I whispered, My king. My protector. My choice. Outside, the pack lands settled into peaceful sleep. The scars from the battle would fade, the wounds would heal, and life would continue in its complex, beautiful way. Celeste was gone. The threat had passed, and a new era had begun. I thought about the girl I'd been 2 years ago, terrified and alone, certain she'd never fit in anywhere. I thought about all the cruelty I'd endured, all the times I'd wanted to give up. And I was grateful for every moment of it, because that pain had led me here, to this man, to this pack, to this life where I was finally, miraculously, enough. Donovan's breathing evened out as he drifted to sleep, but I stayed awake a while longer, watching the moon paint silver patterns across his face. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There was always more work to do, more healing needed, more bridges to build. But tonight, we were safe. We were together. We were home. And that, I thought as I finally let my eyes close, was worth every battle we'd fought to get here. The Northern Pack had a king who'd learned compassion, and a queen who'd learned strength. Together, we would build something better than what had come before. Together, we were enough.